shootings. What is your stance on Second Amendment rights? Dan Cannon.
Thank you. It's an important and timely question. I support the Second Amendment. I support the right to self-defense. I do not support an unlimited Second Amendment. So I don't think people ought to be driving around with grenade launchers in the back of their truck or keeping nuclear bombs in their basement. I think most people agree with that in terms of when we talk about an unlimited Second Amendment. I think that it's important that we strike at the branches, that we do literally anything that we can do to curb gun violence in the United States. And the problem right now is that nothing is being done by this Congress, perhaps the most ineffective legislative body in history. We've got to do something. I think our current representatives' stance on this is to let's let sheriffs carry their guns into federal courthouses, and let's make it easier for people to buy silencers. That's not the kind of solution that I'm talking about. I think we do need to strike at the branches of the problem. So if we're talking about universal background checks, that should be a no-brainer. I think virtually everybody, every gun owner I've ever talked to is on board with that. We should have expanded access to mental health care. It goes back to the health care piece that we talked about before. People should be able to get early and ongoing intervention if they have mental health problems of any kind. We should keep firearms out of the hands of people who are domestic abusers. That, again, should be a no-brainer. There should be some sort of training protocol or training requirements to make sure that people can safely use firearms. But the most important thing is to strike at the roots of this problem. And this is where we've been the most hindered on this issue, is that for 20 years now, we've not been able to meaningfully research the roots of gun violence because of the Dickey Amendment, which was enacted in 1996. That keeps funding from going to the CDC to research the root causes of gun violence. We've got to get at the root if we're going to know how to approach it from a legislative standpoint in any sort of effective way. I think that's where we start. Thank you.
As I mentioned the other night at the forum up in Bloomington, I have guns. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. Obviously a lot of folks in our district are going to have guns. It's insane though. I mean, it's absolutely insane what we have now. And I think that it's gone so far that if we don't handle this problem very carefully, it could end up in some violence, definitely end up with a lot of people doing stupid things. But they already are doing stupid. I mean, I just 50, the guy up in, out in Las Vegas that, was it, how many died? 56? 58? They're going into our schools, little babies, little kids. We gotta get a grip on this. And the only way that we're gonna be able to do that is if we make alliances with, not even the NRA, screw them, I could care less about the national NRA, but it's definitely gonna have to be more handled locally. I talked to NRA members up in Bloomington at the Monroe County Fair this summer, and they were willing to talk to me. And it's going to be a trust thing. They're very emotional about their guns, and they're very attached to them. I mean, it's almost like a worship type of thing. I don't. My guns, not much. I don't get my identity from things like that or whatever. I mean, I'm me. But a lot of those people do. And they're afraid. They're going to be afraid. They've been told to be afraid. We've got the NRA pumping out all sorts of propaganda now. So really what we need is people that understand that culture, understand guns. There's been legislation that was introduced over the last week that does absolutely nothing at all. It's symbolic, but the potential for danger is just as there as it was before this legislation. Go back to the Clinton ban. But really, we have to build alliances and trust within the gun community, the rural community. I guarantee I'm the best guy to do that. They will listen.
So I approached this issue as a mom first. I have a second grader and a fifth grader, and like all of you who are sending kids out to school in the morning, I'm thinking about, are they going to come home at the end of the day? Are they going to be safe? That's the first thing on my mind. And so really, when you think about how we are just a little less than 2 months out from the most deadly mass shooting in our nation's history, every single time Congress decides to have a moment of silence instead of taking action, shame on them. Shame on them. Of course I support the Second Amendment. I grew up in a house with 2 guns. I'll tell you what, I don't think you need an assault rifle to shoot deer. I don't think you could probably eat the deer afterward if it was shot up with an assault rifle, right? There are things we can do. There are things that responsible gun owners agree on, and I'm with the responsible gun owners on the idea that we can support universal background checks. We can do this. We can agree on this. The NRA even agrees that we don't need bump stocks, right? We can agree on that. We need to find solutions. We need to find common ground. We have a national crisis on our hands when it comes to gun violence. As somebody who has represented women who are victims of domestic violence in seeking orders of protection, I believe that if you have been convicted of domestic violence, you don't really have any business having a gun. I don't want to see women die. So there are things that we can do, there are things we can agree on. We have to come out of our corners and we have to start finding our common ground. Our kids are watching and they're counting on us.